Hi, everyone. Back for yet another edition of Facebook Live for Hit Subscribe. And I don't actually look in a mirror all that often this week anymore, so I like trim my beard, and that's good, but I really need a haircut. And that's illegal in the New World Order, so I'm either going to have to get Amanda to do it or wait until a robust black market of haircut forms, whichever comes first. But in the meantime, let's do a Facebook Live about getting into management. I thought this was kind of an interesting prompt. So a little bit of background. I spent the first half of my career, I guess, as an individual contributing software engineer. I sort of had team leadership responsibilities in that capacity, but never like actual organizational reports. And then through my 30s, like the second half of my career, I have had organizational reports. So it's kind of interesting to hear a prompt about what it's like to go into management. It's been a minute since I did that, but I certainly do have thoughts on the matter. Sorry, I'm getting pinged here. So anyway, getting perhaps a little bit more organized, let's dive into that topic. The thing that'll happen to you if you have a standard corporate job, like a knowledge work type job. I don't have a lot of experience with like factory floor management or like retail management or anything like that. So I'm speaking here mainly about my own experience of working in the corporate world. But let's say that you're a copywriter or you're a software engineer or what have you. You're an individual contributor doing your job. Sooner or later, the, I guess, vacuum of like corporate pressure will try to suck you up out of individual contributor land and into like managing probably whatever it is you were most recently doing. So you're going to go from managing copywriters to being a copywriter manager, a software engineering manager, what have you. And from what I've seen of people in that position, and a lot of my travels included management consulting, management myself, and just seeing this at different levels of organizations, you're going to probably do one thing, which is if you're not careful, you're going to glom onto what you know. And if you're the copywriter promoted to copywriter manager, what you know is copywriting more than you know like management and leadership skills. So you'll probably have this hopefully benevolent tendency to micromanage because you're going to dive back into the weeds of the thing you know. Now, this scales poorly. It can work out all right if you have like a person or two reporting to you, but if you're really down in the weeds with like 7, 8 people that are reporting to you, you're going to find yourself working 60 or 70 hours a week just to kind of like micromanage these people. So what typically then happens next is that you kind of abdicate. So you get tired of that and then you swing in the other direction, and you maybe go all the way back to doing nothing by way of like getting into the people's work, so to speak. I don't think I put that very well, but like you just say like, this is enough. I'm just going to let everybody do their own thing. You get very laissez-faire about it. And that's not the best either because people will be interested in your experience, both organizationally and in terms of what you know how to do. So if you're a newly minted manager, I would avoid this set of swings, and I would suggest that you approach it in the first place a little bit more deliberately. Acknowledge your own natural tendency to want to go back to what you were doing and fight that, and define like triggers and boundaries for yourself. And what I mean by that is if you're managing the pool of copywriters, what is okay for them to do? So you don't need to be involved in like every piece that gets written, but like maybe if you're working for a magazine, like online publication or something, you have a trigger that says if there's like a complaint about a piece or if a piece gets a certain amount of negative feedback, then I should probably get involved, work with the person who wrote it. Like, let's take a look at what's going on. Maybe I'm doing some guidance here, providing structured feedback, etc. But until that trigger is hit, until that thing that prompts your oversight is hit, stay out of their way. Let people do their thing. Let them be creative. That's generally how I would suggest it. So go in there deliberately when you're new to management and think about what you would want to be involved in and what you wouldn't, and like write that out, like define it, and stay out of people's way once they're kind of in that space where you're not really to be involved. I would, let's see. So another thing in the command and control world of like most organizations, there might be this tendency to kind of conflate manager, leader, and boss. And I would argue that those are three fairly different things, even if they're all subtly like rolled into one person. But boss kind of comes with this idea that you're going to order people around. And this is reinforced a little bit by the fact that curiously we structure knowledge work ventures in the 21st century like the military, command and control in a pyramid structure. So you can have this tendency to get promoted into management and think that a lot of what that means is kind of like ordering people around and making lots of rules. Fight that impulse. It will make you bad at managing people in a knowledge work environment. Instead, what I would suggest doing is creating as few rules as you can kind of get away with. Like, have policies and procedures. Your department should have a way of doing things, but in terms of rules, like when people have to arrive, what they have to wear, all this type of stuff, don't get out ahead of yourself creating rules. Create as few rules as possible and create them only in response to actual issues. So if you just decide, hey, now I'm the boss and everybody's going to get here at 8 a.m. and I'm going to punish people if they're not here at 8 a.m., etc., why are you creating that rule? Like, what problem is that solving? Because if it's not solving any problem, if you can't explain it, if you're just creating a rule, I wouldn't do that. And the reason I wouldn't do that is because the more rules you create, the less powerful and effective each one of them is. If you're an organization that says, like, look, maybe we're a customer service org, we only have 2 rules, get back to the client in the amount of time we said we would, and like always be friendly to the client. Those are only 2 rules. People are going to stick to them. If you have hundreds of rules, people will forget them. They won't seem as important. You'll just seem like kind of a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. It'll be like the sort of iconic example of like a government bureaucracy where, anyway, don't do it. Don't create a lot of rules. Create as few as possible. Don't like relish in, being the boss. I promise that will wear off very quickly unless you're, I don't know, have some issues. But like, yeah, try to let people make adult decisions. Because remember, like, in as much as the corporate organization can kind of seem like a parent, like we're all adults. So like let the adults that are reporting to you be adults as much as you can. I'd say another big one, and this is a little harder to define, at least in terms of like do A, B, and C, but like create an environment where people can make mistakes. So I had talked earlier about there's kind of like this window where it's the copywriters, like unless anybody complains, just let people do whatever they're going to do. In a similar fashion, have like areas or ways of existing or what have you that within which people can make mistakes. And I don't know exactly how to define that, but like people learn and grow, and your business, your organization gets better by people experimenting and sometimes failing and like, making mistakes. That needs to happen. You can't prevent people from making mistakes. So set up like clear places within which making mistakes is acceptable. So like if in the copywriting example, everything's okay as long as nobody's complaining, the readers aren't complaining, encourage people to go right up to that point of complaint and tell them that the first complaint they get, there's no consequences, that's okay. You almost have this like budget for making a mistake. And the reason I say that is because if they're copywriters, if everybody's writing the same thing over and over again, it's not going to be very interesting. Encourage them to be avant-garde, to do strange things. You might stumble upon some great stuff that propels you to success, but then maybe, somebody complains, you have to rein that back in, but that's okay. You have defined that as something that the people in your organization can make a mistake, and you won't punish them for that. So create ways that they can experiment, and that if something goes wrong, it's okay, you learn from it and move on. An adage I kind of like is, forgive any mistake that people make once. Try to have an organization where you don't make the same mistakes twice. Let's see. I guess part and parcel with that is, I would say, as a new manager, default to trusting people. The corporate environment is a strange beast. Like, it starts with the job interview, which, at the risk of getting on a soapbox, I think is actually kind of a stupid thing. But that's a topic for another video. But the job interview, the way you enter an organization is through a fundamental like posture of distrust. You come in, you sit down, and I interview you. And what I'm trying to do in that interview is to suss out all the things you're lying about because the interview assumes that you're incompetent. And that's how we greet people into our organizations. So it's really easy to assume that people are going to cheat and lie and steal and do all these horrible things. But the reality is the people working for you rarely do that. They're mostly adults. Usually, if you trust them, they will reward that trust. So a big policy of mine is to operate from a position of trust. So we're a remote organization, and if I saw that somebody wasn't online all morning, I don't assume that they were playing hooky and not working. I assume they were working on something else. So trust people until you have a reason not to. And philosophically speaking, if you find that you can't trust the people that report to you, you have a much bigger problem than you're going to solve with a handful of arbitrary rules. If that's the case, your organization is all the way broken, and you need to like ask questions at a much higher level of maybe your leadership of why do we have people working here that we don't trust, and how do we fix that? I guess another thing that I'll say, this is kind of a personal policy of mine, but when you have people reporting to you, schedule one-on-ones with them, make those one-on-ones regular, and make sure to go over kind of a set of things that you want to cover, but it's oriented around morale and making people feel heard. Especially like as an organization grows, it's really easy to get lost in the shuffle of everything. And if you're a person working there, especially an individual contributor, it's very easy to feel like nobody cares what you have to say. You're not going to solve that with a one-on-one with your reports. Like, you're not going to single-handedly fix that, but you can give them that moment, that opportunity to be heard. And so I have some pretty, serious rules about how I want to conduct these one-on-ones with people. First of all, don't be late. That's bad form. Always be on time. Like if you work in the corporate environment, you know what I'm talking about. There's this office political thing where the amount that you're late to meetings is like directly proportional to how important you are. So there's no better way to signal that you're super important than sauntering into a meeting like 10 minutes late and being like, oh, I'm sorry, my 10 o'clock ran over. Like, that's what the middle management does. It's a way to like plant your flag is important in office politics. Don't do that with people reporting to you. That's garbage. It's childish. Show up on time, be an adult, and bring your full attention to that. And that is one of the most important meetings you can possibly have. So establish that from day one. Treat the people there with respect and make sure you do it week in and week out, and make sure that you're paying a lot of attention. That might be one of the most like critical pieces of advice I could give to a new manager. And then the last thing I'll close with, maybe a little bit more iconoclastically, ironically, given that like this is now my role as the CEO of a business, but the big boss and or the customer isn't always right. So when you have people in your organization that you're managing, don't create the kind of environment where you are cool and you're running things and you're doing right by your people until the VP above you comes along and poops on one of them somehow, and then you throw them under the bus. Like, don't do that. It might cost you politically, but create an environment where people feel like you have their back, even if it costs you to a degree. Even if you have to go to bat for them in uncomfortable situations, even if you have to stand up to or even like fire a customer, do that. You can run your business without a customer. You can run your business sort of awkwardly at odds with your boss from time to time. You can't run your business or department if the people in it don't trust you and aren't, doing good work. Like, you can't survive that. So make sure that the external parties don't seem like they're always right, and make sure that people in your organization feel like you're representing them and standing up for them. So yeah, those are the tips that I would offer new managers. I don't know, it's a kind of a strange thing. It's been a while, but I've tried to carry some of this stuff with me, whether it's my own businesses or others I've worked at where I've had people reporting to me. Management, when you get into it, I guess what I would say is it's a different skill set. A lot of organizations will promote the best whatever to be the whatever manager. They maybe don't know how to do it any better, and maybe that's the most fair way to do it, but understand when you get there that being the best software engineer or the most experienced software engineer, copywriter, whatever, doesn't make you the best manager. Like, understand that leading people in a corporate context is a different skill set, and like, go out and do some research and read about and try to understand this new skill set that you're taking on. So yeah, that's all I've got this week. Hopefully one of these weeks I'll be able to get a haircut, but in the interim, I will keep doing the Facebook Lives. Have a good one.